He said I had let myself go. Then he said he wasn't sure he'd ever really been attracted to me. I was 34 years old, standing in our kitchen in Oakville, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold while he talked. The February light was flat and gray through the window above the sink. I remember looking at the frost on the glass and thinking, stay very still. Just stay very still and let him finish. His name was Elliot. We had been married for 7 years. I want to tell you what kind of woman I was when Elliot married me. Not because it matters. I know now that it doesn't, but because I spent a long time believing it did. I was 27, finishing my master's in landscape architecture at the University of Toronto. I ran 4 mornings a week along the waterfront. I cooked real food. I laughed easily. I had a best friend named Priya, who used to say I was the most put-together person she knew, which I always deflected, because I'd grown up being told that confidence in a woman was something close to vanity, and vanity was the worst thing you could be. My grandmother, Odette, had told me something different. She was from Quebec, she made her own bread, she wore the same wool coat for 30 years and looked magnificent in it, and she used to hold my face in both hands and say, "Cecile, you are not here to make yourself small. You are here to take up space." She died the spring before Elliot and I got engaged. I wore her ring on my right hand at our wedding. 7 years later, I was standing in that kitchen, and the ring was still on my right hand, and Elliot was explaining to me, calmly, with the tone he used in board meetings, that he had been unhappy for a long time. That I had changed, that I wasn't the woman he'd married. "In what way?" I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He looked at me for a moment, not unkindly. That was the part that stayed with me longest, that he didn't look cruel. He looked tired. "You've put on weight," he said. "You don't take care of yourself the way you used to. I don't feel the same way I used to feel." I set the mug down on the counter. I didn't throw it. I didn't cry. I asked him if there was someone else. He said no. I believed him. That was my first mistake. Elliot worked in commercial real estate development. When we met, he'd been a junior partner at a firm in downtown Toronto. By the time we bought the house in Oakville, a 4-bedroom with a yard I had personally landscaped, hedges I had shaped with my own hands, a garden that people slowed their cars to look at, he was managing a portfolio worth well over $40 million. I was proud of him. I said so often. I built my freelance practice around his schedule, took client meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays when he was reliably out of the house, and arranged my entire professional life so that our life together could function without friction. I didn't see that as a sacrifice at the time. I thought it was just what you did. My mother had done it. My aunt had done it. Most of the women I knew had done some version of it. You made room, you adjusted. You told yourself the word partnership while doing the lion's share of the labor and called it love. What I didn't know, what I would not find out for another 3 weeks, was that Elliot had met someone at an industry conference in Calgary 8 months earlier. Her name was Brooke. She was 26, worked in marketing for a property development company, and had been texting my husband approximately 40 times a day since October. I found out the way women almost always find out, by accident. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen island. I wasn't snooping. I walked past it to get a glass of water, and the screen lit up with a notification. A name I didn't recognize, a message I couldn't not read. "Miss you already." Last night was everything. I stood there for a long time. Then I sat down at the kitchen island and I read everything. It took me 2 hours. The messages went back to October, just as I'd come to suspect. There were hundreds of them. Pet names, hotel receipts forwarded. Weekend plans made and then carefully concealed from me under the guise of site visits and client dinners. There was a message from December where Brooke asked if he had told me yet, and Elliot had replied, "Not yet. It's complicated. She's sensitive." I had to read that sentence 3 times. She's sensitive. 7 years of my life. A house I had made beautiful. Holidays I had planned and carried and cleaned up after. Years of adjusting and accommodating and making room, and I was sensitive. I closed the laptop. I went upstairs. I took a shower. I came back down and I made dinner because Elliot was coming home at 6:30, and I needed to think before I did anything, and thinking, for me, has always required movement and routine. He came home. He kissed me on the cheek. He said dinner smelled good. We sat at the table and ate and talked about whether the Leafs had a real shot this season, and I smiled and answered and watched him, Aunt, and thought, I know everything now. You don't know that I know. And that is the only advantage I will ever have, so I need to be careful with it. I called Priya the next morning after Elliot left for work. I need a lawyer, I said before she even finished saying hello. There was a pause. Cecile, tell me everything. She came over within the hour. She sat across from me at that same kitchen island, and she listened to all of it, and when I finished, she didn't say, I'm so sorry, or I can't believe it. She said, okay, here's what we're going to do. That is the kind of friend Priya is. She'd been, through her own version of this 4 years earlier, had come out the other side clear-eyed and twice as formidable, and she was not going to let me collapse if she could help it. She gave me the name of her divorce lawyer, a woman named Catherine, based in Burlington, who had a reputation for being thorough in ways that opposing counsel found deeply inconvenient. I called Catherine that afternoon. The first thing she said, after I explained the situation, was, don't move any money, don't confront him yet, and don't change your behavior. Let me look at everything first. I did exactly what she said. Over the next 2 weeks, while Elliot moved through our house and our life completely unaware, Catherine and I built a picture of our finances that I had never fully seen before. We had a joint account that I used for household expenses and a joint investment account that we'd been contributing to for 5 years. There was also, it turned out, a discretionary account in Elliot's name alone that I had known existed but never examined closely. I'd trusted him, the way you trust someone you've built a life with, the way I had been taught that trust meant not asking too many questions. He had moved $31,000 out of our joint investment account over 14 months. Small amounts, irregular intervals. The kind of pattern that doesn't announce itself if you're not looking for it. Catherine said it was dissipation. I wrote the word down on a notepad and looked at it for a long time. I confronted Elliot on a Thursday evening in March. I had the folder Catherine had prepared on the table in front of me. I had made tea, which I don't know why I did. Some reflex toward civility, I suppose. Old habits. He came in, saw my face, and went still. Sit down, Elliot, I said. He sat. I told him I knew about Brooke. I told him I knew about the money. I watched his face move through several things. Surprise, calculation, and then something that looked almost like relief, which was the strangest part, and the part that told me everything I needed to know about how long he had been waiting for this to be over. I think we should separate, he said, as though it were his idea, as though he were doing me a kindness. We're not separating, I said. We're divorcing. And Catherine Ng is handling it. He knew Catherine's name. His face changed when I said it. Good. The divorce took 8 months. It was not pleasant. Elliot hired a lawyer who specialized in making discovery as slow and expensive as possible, which is its own kind of message. But Catherine was exactly what Priya had promised, and I had been meticulous, and in the end the settlement reflected that. I kept the house. I want to be clear about what that meant. The house was not just an asset to me. I had spent 3 years of weekends making that garden. I had chosen every plant, drawn every plan, moved actual earth with my actual hands. The hawthorn hedge along the back fence had been 12 inches tall when I planted it. Letting Elliot have the house was never something I was willing to do, and I think Catherine understood that before I even said it out loud. The financial settlement covered the dissipated funds with interest, and Elliot's lawyer eventually stopped fighting it. Brooke, from what Priya gathered through channels I won't get into, had moved on to someone else by the time the divorce was finalized. That detail gave me no satisfaction. I was done caring about Brooke by then. She was a symptom. She was not the disease. What was the disease? I thought about that a lot in the first year. I went to therapy, a woman named Dr. Osi, who had an office in Hamilton and a gift for asking questions that sound simple until you started answering them. She helped me understand that what I'd lived with wasn't just infidelity. It was a slow and patient erosion. The comments about my body, the sighs when I chose what to order at restaurants. The way Elliot would introduce me at work events with a pause before he said my name, as though he were remembering to be proud of me. The comment about my weight in February had not come from nowhere. It had been building for years in smaller forms, and I had absorbed each one and filed it under, "He's just tired. He's stressed. I should try harder." I stopped trying harder. I started doing something else entirely. The landscape architecture practice I had been running part-time out of our house, carefully, quietly, around Elliot's schedule, had 3 steady clients when I moved into the apartment in Hamilton that summer. By December, it had 11. I had been good at my work for years. I had simply not been making it a priority because our life had required something else of me, and I had agreed to that without quite realizing I was agreeing. Once the life was gone, there was nothing left to agree to. There was only the work. I won a design commission the following spring for a public park revitalization project in Burlington, the kind of project I'd been pitching for years without quite clearing the final hurdle. The city had a budget of $2.3 million. My firm, it was a firm by then, 2 employees and a third on the way, was selected over 4 others. I remember getting the call while I was standing in the parking lot of a Home Depot, buying soil amendment for a private client's garden, and I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. Priya brought champagne over that night. We sat on the floor of my apartment because I still didn't have a proper couch, and we drank it out of mugs because I hadn't unpacked the glasses, and she said, "Your grandmother would be insufferably proud of you." And I laughed so hard I spilled champagne on my sleeve. And it was the first time since February of the previous year that I laughed like that, all the way through, without anything underneath it. My grandmother's words had followed me through all of it. "You are not here to make yourself small. You are here to take up space." I had written them on a piece of paper and taped them to the mirror in my bathroom in the Hamilton apartment, and I had read them every morning, some mornings believing them more than others, but always reading them. The Burlington Park project was finished 18 months later, in the autumn. It was written up in the Hamilton Spectator and then picked up by Azure Magazine, which is the kind of design publication that architects and landscape architects actually read. The journalist who interviewed me spent 2 hours in my office asking about process and philosophy, and the photos they commissioned were taken on site, in the park, in the early morning when the light came in low across the water feature I had designed, and the native plantings were just starting to turn color. The issue came out in November. I didn't know that Elliot still subscribed to Azure Magazine. I found out from Priya, who had heard from someone who knew someone, the kind of information that travels in the particular way it travels in mid-sized Canadian cities, where everyone turns out to know everyone eventually. He'd been in a coffee shop in Oakville. The magazine was on the rack near the door. He'd picked it up out of habit, the way people pick up magazines near doors, not expecting anything, and there I was. Page 38, full-page photograph. my name on the cover line. Priya told me he'd stood there for a long time. I thought about that image for exactly one afternoon. A man standing in a coffee shop in Oakville, holding a magazine, looking at the face of the woman he'd told was letting herself go. A man who had moved $31,000 out of our shared future and called me sensitive and looked relieved when I finally confronted him. I thought about it and then I put it away. Because here is what I want you to understand, and why I'm telling you any of this at all. Elliot's reaction, whatever it was, standing there in that coffee shop, had nothing to do with what I had built. It had nothing to do with me. It was just a man encountering the consequences of his own decisions, and those consequences were not mine to carry. They never had been. What I carried was different. I carried the memory of Dr. O.C. asking me, in our third session, when I had last done something just for myself, not for Elliot, not for a client, not for the relationship or the household or anyone else, just for me. I had sat in her office and tried to remember and couldn't. That was the answer, she said without saying it. That was the thing to start with. I carried the 11 months of Tuesdays when I ran along the waterfront again, not to look a certain way, but because my body wanted to run, and I had spent 7 years finding reasons it could wait. I carried the morning I walked through the Burlington Park, after the contractors finished, before it was open to the public, alone in the early light, and I stood beside the water I had designed, and the trees I had chosen, and the paths that went exactly where I had said they would go, and I thought, I made this, not for anyone, not to prove anything, just, I made this, and it is real, and it will be here long after any of this other stuff stops mattering. I carried my grandmother's voice. I'm 38 now. The firm has 7 employees. We have a project in Guelph and another one coming in Ottawa that I'm not supposed to talk about yet, but that I am privately more excited about than anything I have done in my career. I have a real couch. I have unpacked all the glasses. I went on a date last spring. The first one since the divorce, with a man named Declan, who teaches high school history and coaches junior hockey on weekends, and who, on our second date, asked me about my work with the kind of genuine curiosity that I had forgotten people were capable of. I didn't rush anything. I was careful, but I wasn't afraid. My mother asked me once, about a year after the divorce was finalized, if I was angry at Elliot. She asked it carefully, the way she asks things, with one hand on her coffee cup and her eyes on the window. I thought about it for a real moment before I answered. I said, for a while, but it used up a lot of space, and I needed that space for other things. She nodded slowly. Your grandmother used to say something like that, she said. I know she did, I told her. I know she did. The ring is still on my right hand. It has been there through all of it. The marriage, the discovery, the lawyer's office, the apartment with no couch, the park at dawn, the magazine cover, all of it. I don't wear it as a reminder of her loss. I wear it because she told me to take up space, and I intend to keep doing exactly that.